Hello friends, Jenkins Dota here, bringing you another Dota 2 video on behalf of DotaAlchemy.com, and this video is going to be part of the Lessons from the Leaderboard video series. And in this video, I'm going to be covering why UniVeRsE is the most consistent offlaner on the planet. So I was originally going to title this video why UniVeRsE is the best offlaner on the planet, but I think the offlane is such a volatile place right now, just considering how the lanes are, that it's really hard to say at any given point who is the best. It changes very quickly, but I think that UniVeRsE is notorious for being the most consistent. He will go into any lane, any game, and he will do well in any meta. Other offlaners, they'll fall off and they'll come on. UniVeRsE is always solid. So, because it's TI season, because all of the players from around the world are coming to play in Vancouver, I have had the pleasure of playing with a lot of them in US East pubs, and UniVeRsE is one of the players that I have played with, which is excellent because he is probably the person that I've watched the most replays of, simply because I am an offlane player, he is North American, so it makes a lot of sense that I'm biased, obviously, towards UniVeRsE, but I've had the pleasure of playing with him essentially, and it has been excellent because I've learned quite a few things that I otherwise would not have learned. And that is what I want to share with you guys today. So the first thing that I noticed that UniVeRsE does is that he methodically trades his resources for the enemy teams in lane, but he also does this while having a heavy focus on denying and last hitting as the end goal. That is, he intentionally soaked a lot of damage to trade for harass so that he could use his heal in the lane on Enchantress. Instead of just allowing the lane to be won, he realized that he could get more out of it by trading his HP and mana to use the heal and zone the enemy team even more, giving them absolutely no chance. AKA, he used all of his resources he could to safely win the lane as much as possible, and I assume that he would not do this sort of thing if the enemy team had more regen in items or in spells than him, because there'd be no point to doing it. And he did not want to go for any kills unless there was no trade-off for it, because the lane was already won. So essentially, he did everything that he could to get what he safely could from the lane. And you can actually see at certain points in this replay, there are points where me on the Pudge, I'm running into the jungle to fuck with the enemy team, and other players might feel pressured to come help, but he didn't, because he realized that his job was to sit in this lane and deny every single thing and to just get every single last hit as this Enchantress. He had a total focus of efficiency in this lane. So the second thing that I noticed is that it was very clear to me that he was calm in this game simply by his communication and his movements of his hero. And if I was in this game, I said it before, and I might go actually hunt the enemies as Enchantress just to, like, you know, quote unquote punish them harder. But UniVeRsE knew that them jungling or them just sitting behind the creeps and getting nothing was very inefficient for them, and that it wasn't actually his job to do these things, to go fuck with them. You can see in the replay right now, I'm walking over into the jungle. He doesn't even move his camera off the creep wave because he realizes I am doing my job in bullying the enemies. I'm doing my job in pressuring them, and he has essentially got another job in this game to do, which is to pressure them in the mid game. And he's focusing on getting last hits because that's going to allow him to do that job the best he can. So the third thing that I noticed is that he was not overly aggressive, and this obviously ties into what I was just saying. So he won't make a play unless it's a complete guaranteed success. He has what I would call controlled aggression. So he has this idea of the state of the lane that he wants, and then once it's in that state, he's not going to get anxious and push for more because he had preemptively thought of what he wants the lane to be like, and it's like that, so he's fine. So he comes over here only because the pull is happening, so he knows that when he goes back into the lane, he's going to lose nothing for going for this kill. So a pure focus on his own efficiency and doing his own job in this game. So the fourth thing that I noticed, actually something that he said to me in the game, is that he asked for a ward from me in a very specific area in the offlane. Essentially, he wanted a ward. Once we ended up taking this tier 1 tower, he wanted a ward kind of protecting him from the enemy shrine area. And that just made me realize that his game plan in this certain game was to essentially sit up here in this lane and be as absolutely cancer as possible, making space for his team as opposed to trying to run around and make space for his team by killing the heroes in their lanes. Like, he was going to essentially make space in this game by pressuring. So he would essentially relieve pressure from his team by applying pressure up in this top lane. So it's kind of a different way to think about Dota, but it was obviously very, very effective in this game because he completely destroyed, and we ended up winning very, very quickly. So basically he had this idea, and he communicated to me what he wanted to do, and asked me for essentially assistance in doing that. So he has this idea of a job, and not only does he have an idea of a job and does he commit to it himself, he also tries to communicate to his team what they should be doing as well to help him do his job better. So that kind of made me realize there's this kind of 50-50% communication thing, where if you want somebody to do something in a game, it's 50% on them to know that that's their role to do it, and then 50% on you to know that that's what you need to be done in order to make your job a lot easier to do. And UniVeRsE, obviously playing on many, many competitive teams, naturally does this, because that's how you would do it in competitive. So basically, to sum it all up, the most important thing that I learned from this replay, from this game, was that it's very obvious that UniVeRsE looks at the enemy draft in a game, looks at his own draft, and then gathers an extremely good idea of what his job is in that game, and he executes that meticulously, assuming that his team is intelligent enough to do their job. And he doesn't even move his camera, like I said, to see if I'm doing my job. He doesn't get anxious. It was very clear that he was super calm about executing in this game. And he just tries to do his job perfectly, and if he wins, he wins, and if he loses, he loses. So the final thing I want to say here is that you can see that there's very little anxious movements in his play. Like, he gets ganked right now, and it doesn't even seem like he cares that much about it. Like, his camera's not moving erratically or anything like that. He wasn't communicating erratically, and that's because he knew that his job here was to get the siege creep and to pressure the tower, which would win those other lanes. So for me, for example, if I'm playing the Enchantress, we were playing against Thompson on the middle lane, who's obviously a fucking amazing player. He was completely destroying our Queen of Pain, and I might feel pressured if I was the Enchantress to go directly to that lane and try to gank him, but UniVeRsE actually essentially ruins Thompson's lane by forcing him to come top, by picking up that siege creep. And you can actually see that he even leveled the enchant at like level 3 or level 2 or something like that, because he was so sure in the game plan that the way he wanted to pressure Thompson to come to this lane and to die was not to go to Thompson himself, but to get Thompson to come here. And that was the idea he had preemptively, and that is the best way to execute on Enchantress. And he did not freak out. He was very calm about it. He was very objective, and that helped him win this game. So here we are in a game that I played recently, where I was playing Enchantress in a very similar situation to UniVeRsE when I was playing with him in the replay that we previously just watched. And the very first thing that I did in this game to try to implement the things that I learned from playing with UniVeRsE is that I communicated to my team before the game even started what I think my job was. And I was basically just like, okay guys, I'm going to sit in this top lane for 30 minutes. Basically, I'm going to start fighting with you guys only when I think that we can't lose with the items that we have, and until that point, you need to be taking the space, because I think one of the issues that UniVeRsE has solved by playing Enchantress the way that he does, and by sticking to a game plan the way that he does, is that he solved the fact that she really falls off if you try to fight and you die a couple of times, but you can force the enemy team to essentially be behind you in gold and experience by virtue of them being so starved, as opposed to you farming very quickly, because this hero really doesn't farm quickly. So basically, I communicated that was my game plan to my team, which resulted in picks like Weaver and Lina, these heroes that can take a lot of space and do a lot with it. And then also, I communicated to this yellow player that, hey man, can you play Treant Protector, Wind Ranger, Pudge, like one of these heroes that can essentially set up for a really easy lane by virtue of being a really strong harass hero, a really strong kill hero to lane with the Enchantress, because I know that what my job is essentially in the 30 minutes after the laning phase ends to make as much space for my team as possible and be as unkillable as possible. And in order to be set up best to do that, I need to have a hero in my lane that can do a lot to set up for a really easy laning stage to essentially give me the farm so I can be unkillable. And that's exactly why you see UniVeRsE focusing on getting a lot of those last hits, because he knows that his job comes after that laning phase, really. And the laning phase is won mostly by virtue of the support for the most part. At the very least, if you don't have a good duo, you're just going to get screwed, even if you have an Enchantress. So speaking of doing that job correctly, I was focusing heavily on getting a lot of last hits in this lane and denies which is something that I wouldn't necessarily have so much of a focus on. And the way that I was focusing on it was that, of course, I was trading with the opponents, the Terrorblade and the Crystal Maiden. I think that Pudge and Enchantress can definitely outlane them in terms of harass, especially once I get the heal up and once his meta is down. However, what I was doing is when I was trading with him, and obviously in this scenario I'm standing in the trees because he has the meta, and it's not efficient to trade with him when he has the meta, but when he doesn't have the meta, what I would essentially do is I would keep my peripheral vision on the Terrorblade, and I would hit the Terrorblade, but I'd keep my camera on the creeps, and I would keep looking at the creeps because I don't want to miss any single last hit. And obviously when Pudge hits an amazing hook like that, I just go for the kill and go for the hits, and I was kind of ignoring the creeps. But you can see that my camera barely moves away from the creep wave because I was really trying to focus on those creeps first and foremost, because I know that my job starts when the laning phase is over, and that's really the whole point of this hero and why she's so incredibly strong. So I'm harassing the heroes. That's actually a point that I wanted to make note of to you guys, where you saw that there was like 2 creeps chasing them under the tower. The reason that I hit them so much there and I didn't focus on the creep wave was because there was 2 creeps hitting them. So I know that if they turn around and try to harass me, that it'll be very efficient trading, just because the 2 creeps would be hitting them as well. So I knew that was some free hits on them that I could get because there were 2 creeps chasing them under the tower, and that's why I took that and didn't focus on the last hits. But you can see that while I'm harassing the Terrorblade, what I'm actually doing is I'm paying attention to the range creep to see if I can deny it. I noticed I couldn't deny it. The Pudge hits a nice hook with the enchant setup. We end up killing him, which is fantastic. But what my eyes were really on is the creeps, and obviously when kills happen, that kind of changes. So I think what this Terrorblade was doing was actually pretty effective, and I would prefer to have somebody do what he's doing as opposed to doing nothing at all and just standing behind the creep wave trying to get experience, because Dota doesn't work like that anymore. So I think that's actually better if you go into a lane and die a bunch and you're still getting decent CS. And if we go to the last hits and denies here, you know, he's not doing too bad. He's about half of mine, but that's honestly not that bad for how bad this lane is going for them. But I think it's a lot better that he does this than to just sit and get nothing, because those denies are so effective, and you also can't send out regen to the side lanes because mid is in such dire need of the courier at all times. So basically what makes sense is that, like, if you're sitting in the lane and getting a lot of denies and a lot of last hits but dying for it, it's actually kind of okay, because mid uses the courier so much that you're essentially getting regen by going back to base, bringing the regen with you by dying. So it's kind of a twofold thing where you're getting those last hits and denies that you otherwise wouldn't, which obviously are very effective, and you're trading your life for it. But in trading your life for it, you're also going to base and picking up extra regen and getting a full mana and HP pool. So I actually think what this Terrorblade is doing is not that bad. But there's also, you know, jungling, and there's other ways to win a lane that's like this, that's not just feeding relentlessly. So one last thing that I want to point out that I did quite differently in this game is that I did not feel a hunger for kills, which I would normally feel in most other games, simply because that's the type of player that I am. So in this scenario, if I wasn't thinking, okay, what would UniVeRsE do, I probably would walk up and beat the shit out of this Crystal Maiden, despite the Terrorblade clearly trying to wrap around on me and kill me. So I played it really safe, simply because I was thinking, okay, what my job is to make a lot of space in the mid-game, and if I die in this lane here, this is not going to set me up to do that well. So I don't need to push my advantage because he has Metamorphosis. It's going to run out. I can heal myself up when heal is up. There's no need to really risk not being able to do my job when I know if I just execute cleanly, we're going to win the game. And I knew it would be very easy to do that. And that actually allowed me to keep a very objective mindset. And luckily, the Pudge is the one that is setting up all the kills, and I didn't really need to do anything. And that's kind of one thing that I think you have to realize when you're playing Dota is you have a specific job. If you do it, there's nothing more that can be said about a game. If you do your job correctly, you can't feel bad about losing if your team didn't do their job. It's all about doing your job and just communicating as effectively as you can, and if you lose, you lose. And that really helped me have an objective mindset in this game, thanks to UniVeRsE.